The South Carolina conference that belongs to welcome you to the South Carolina State Conference. I'd like to take this opportunity to move forward, but first,
Good afternoon, everybody. A day of service, right? In keeping with the tradition, we want to talk about some issues that affect community of color, but as we all know, any issue that affects communities of color also affects the general population. So let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll move on our discussion. And the discussion should go pretty rapidly, so make sure you guys are paying attention. I may just give you a quiz at the end of it. So to my left, we have Ms. Kennedy Starnes, to here as head of operations for a professional football team. Yes. Next to Kennedy, we have Dominique Great, who is a dynamic visionary and entrepreneur from Columbia, South Carolina, where he matriculated through the Richland School District, 2 schools, graduating in June 2008 from Richland Northeast High School. After completing high school, he obtained his BA from University of South Carolina, where he double majored in African American Studies and Religious Studies with a minor in history. Gene Chrisman Fellow at Wake Forest University, graduating May 2015 with a Master of Divinity. Since September of 2015, Dominique is an active pastor in the African American Episcopal Church, having pastored in both Batesburg, Leesville, South Carolina, and now currently in Lexington. Okay, so and next to Dominique, we have Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, who is a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist and progressive. He is also very well known as part of our Democratic leadership as Hamilton, Vermont, and of course he's from Brooklyn, New York, and he also has served in the House of Representatives for over 16 years. So I don't think I needed to tell all of you that, but just in case you didn't know who he was, now you do. Another very familiar face on the end there, last but definitely not least, is Mr. James Harrison, who is a first-generation college graduate. He graduated from Yale University as well as Georgetown University Law School. Jamie previously worked as a counsel and director for floor operations for the former House Majority Whip James Clyburn, hailing from Orangeburg, South Carolina. He began working in politics in Orangeburg, youngest person and the first African American to serve as director of the U.S. House Democratic Caucus. Jamie was also the South Carolina Democratic Party's first African American chair. Jamie served as a principal for Podesta Group, overseeing the firm's transportation practice. Before entering politics, Jamie worked in education, serving as chief operations officer and director of program development for the College Summit, a national nonprofit organization that assists low-income students to enroll in. He also taught ninth grade social studies, high school alma mater, Orangeburg Wilkinson High. And you know he's going to always point out Orangeburg Wilkinson High. So as we move forward, and I guess I should probably tell you a little bit about myself as well. I am Angela Douglas. I am a city councilwoman from the city of Chester, South Carolina, and I have had 2 elections in less than 2 years as I move into my first term. I know that's a lot of calculations for a short period of time, but I'm also a political scientist. I've worked and taught at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Now I am a business tax consultant. So yes, I am dealing with all of the shutdown stuff, yes. Okay. So that's who we are. This is the group, and we invite you to listen to our conversation. Unfortunately, time will not allow us to take questions from the audience, but hopefully you will be able to write those down and be able to engage in conversation with elected officials as they come in and out of your life over the next few years. So, topic number 1 is education. As you know, the NAACP pushes for education, sustainable education, progressive education, and education for all. So, as we talk about education, I'm going to frame this in a couple different ways. The first way is to talk about student loan debt. As someone who has multiple graduate degrees, I very well understand student loan debt. Student loan debt among the American student continues to soar, reaching upwards of $1.5 trillion, about $30,000 per borrower. That also accounts for our second largest debt category, only second to mortgages and home equity loans. So this is a grave issue for all of us. So I want to open up to panels. We have Kennedy, who will be heading into college soon, and all of us have, graduated from schools, so we understand this debt. So I want to open it up to the panel, starting with Kennedy, and work on this issue of massive debt in college education.
As a senior in high school, where you're going and how you're going to pay for it. I have 2 older siblings, thankfully both on scholarships, and that's really what I feel would help us with this debt, not through just getting loans. My biggest concern is hard sometimes because I'm often judged by to as many as I can, thankfully, but taking out a student loan can it comes discouraged out because I feel that it's become like a pressing matter, and it only
Thank you. Question as a person who is message that I want to think big, not small. often what the system tells us is the only choices you have are between A and B, tiny little choices. Yet it is time in the wealthiest country in the history of the world to think a little bit bigger. Now, if we were a poor country, we'd say, goodness, lucky to go to college on that. Now, when I came to South Carolina 3 years ago, I said, you know, maybe in this period in American history, we might want to look at public education a little bit differently than we used to. For the last 100 years, what have we thought about when we thought about free public education? We say kindergarten, if you're lucky, through 12th grade. Well, guess what? The world has changed. And to make it into the middle class, to get the decent paying jobs that these young people want, by and large, they're going to need a higher education. It is time now, and this is not a radical idea, to make certain that public colleges and universities are tuition free. All right? And I want to tell you that when I brought that idea in the campaign, people thought it was a very radical and crazy idea. But you know what's happening all over this country right now? In fact, states and municipalities are moving in exactly that direction, because they understand that in a competitive global economy, these young people need the best quality education available. All right? Second of all, Donald Trump just thought it was important last year to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. Military spending has been very significantly increased. We now spend more than the next 10 nations combined. Well, it seems to me that if we have money available to give tax breaks to billionaires and spend a fortune on the military, you know what else we could do? We could substantially reduce student debt in this country. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable that kids are graduating. You heard what Kennedy said. Bright kids in this country cannot afford to go to college. Think what that means to this country. Others, I have talked to people from medical school, dental school. You know what their debt is? We're talking $300,000-$400,000. We need doctors, we need dentists, we need teachers. All right, so we need a revolution in how we fund higher education in this country, and the time is long overdue for us to bring about that revolution.
I want to thank Senator Sanders for his bold leadership on this. This is a crisis. Some of you may not know how big of a crisis. I think much of it really started with my generation. My mom was 16 years old when she dropped out of high school. My mother had a fourth grade, grandmother had an 8th grade education. Most African Americans, most college. I went to Yale. Law school, student loan. Left Georgetown with 100. This was 14 years ago. So that's low compared to what some of these young. When you have $160,000 debt, you know who I hated the most? Sallie Mae. Because every month, she would call, knocking on my door, asking for $1,000. Before I bought groceries for my house, before I paid my rent, before I paid my car payment. $1,000 to go to Sallie Mae. I was working on Capitol Hill and robbing Peter to pay Paul. Taught high school for a year. That stood forces young people to then go to other places where they can make the money in order. And when you're young, black, and poor, it is not just about you. I still had my grandmother and my grandfather. I still had my mom whose house was being foreclosed on. And so your responsibility, because you were the one to get that education, is not just for yourself. So we really have to tackle this issue in this country, particularly for African Americans and other folks of color, to really get to the place where equity and the American dream is for everyone. So again, I applaud Senator Sanders for his leadership, his visionary leadership on this. We really have to figure this out for the young people.
Well, unfortunately, that wraps up our time for topic number 1. If there's time left at the end, back, because I know we could have an entire session on education. Okay, so topic number 2 is economy. And they wanted to be sure that we also talked a little bit about, do we towards the African American community threats that you're
So I'm married to a food and drug. It's scary at times. My wife follows FDA. We sort of take for granted in all of the measures safe, all of the regulation that's really, really important. I get to hear the fears all the time by talking to my wife. One hint, never get ice while you're on the plane. You can ask me about that later, but don't get ice when you're on the plane. I found that out the hard way. So one of the things that we need to be, people are not employed sectors. Those people who make sure that our food and that we consume are safe they are currently not working. The medicine that we take, they're not working. When we get on an airplane, TSA officials who are working but not drawing a paycheck. The safety of this nation, the president says that for $5 billion he wants. That has a residual impact on every single one of us. So it's important. It's important. And what's important? Let's leave Donald Trump out of the equation. You know how we fix this? Get Mitch McConnell to put a bill on the floor. That is how we get this to change. So Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott, what we need to do here in South Carolina, blow up their phone lines. Call, knock on their doors. We need to get the pressure on them to get Mitch McConnell to put a bill on the floor. The House has passed 9 bills, 9 different times to pass bills to open this government. You know what the Senate has done? Nothing. Because Mitch McConnell will not allow these senators in order to stand up and vote on this, because he knows when he allows that bill to come on the floor, he knows it's going to pass. And therefore, he's going to be embarrassed. We need to stand up and support Senator Sanders and all of the efforts.
As you answer this question, talk a little bit more about what Jamie just actually saying, that not the bill that some of
things. I want to think for a moment. Cruelty coming from the White House. 100,000 kids, they got to feed the kids, they got to pay for childcare. What happens if somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck gets sick today, or their kid gets sick? Not having the money to go to the doctor. Incredibly cruel, issue number 1. Jamie touched on the second important issue. That is, these workers provide services to the American people. Now, you got me nervous about ICE on airplanes. You have to tell me about that. All right. But these are vitally important. I'm going to get on a plane tomorrow night, and you got TSA workers there. They don't make a whole lot of money. Their job is to keep us safe, to keep terrorists from getting on an airplane. These people are not getting paid. Third point I want to make that people have not talked about much. Understand that right-wing ideology suggests that government is terrible and awful, that they want to ultimately privatize much of government and give it over to corporate America. So if you think about this, Trump talks about a shutdown going on for month after month. If you have hundreds of thousands of people not getting paid, some of them will leave, others are not getting hired. This is a way to move toward the privatization of government services and give large corporations more control over our life. Let me answer the question that you raised. Many of you may not know, but before this shutdown began, before Fox News and the other right-wing outlets started attacking Trump, the United States Senate voted what we call unanimous consent. No United States senator, no Republican, no Democrat opposed a resolution which would have kept the government open until February. Mitch McConnell supported that resolution. So all we are saying, is what Jamie said, is we're saying to Mitch McConnell, do what you did a month ago before the shutdown, do what the Democrats in the House have done, let's reopen the government. So the demand has got to be, Mitch, do your job.
My biggest issue with the government shutdown is that I know there are a lot of people out here with jobs, but it's not going to just stop with them. Shutdown was shut down because of the budget and how we're going to spend our money growing, and it's going to start hitting people harder and harder each day. Eventually, there won't be any funds, breakfast or lunch. Probably the only 2 meals we have a day because they are on a free lunch. My biggest issue is that they aren't taking into effect everybody who's a part of this. The government is shut down, but the people in the government are still getting paid. The senators and legislators are still getting paid. So if the government is shut down, then everybody shouldn't be getting paid, not just the people who work on the outskirts. It shouldn't be the bottom of the bottom. It should be the bottom, the top, the middle. Everybody should be a part of the shutdown.
Good job. Okay, so as we transition to criminal justice, which is by locking too many people up. During the 2016 presidential candidate, Will Wilson also criminalized the victims, and we should be focused on the help the victims, highlighting how funded crime often seduces impoverished communities, particularly communities of color. How do you think many do not talk about the privatization of prisons or bail bonds or any of those things? What are some of the shortcomings?
Talking about what we mean by criminals. I'll give you an example. Some kid in South Carolina get picked up today for possession of marijuana and get a criminal record. Is that right? 10 years ago, we had a handful of Wall Street executives who led this country through their illegal activities, their recklessness, their dishonesty, into the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Millions of people lost their jobs, lost their savings, and in some cases lost their lives. Okay? How many of those Wall Street executives who caused so much suffering in this country went to jail? Anyone know? None. So you got a kid in South Carolina, used to be in Vermont, we just reformed that, could get arrested for possession of marijuana. Then you go out and you get a job, right? And your employer says, do you ever have a criminal record? Well, yes, sir, I was arrested for possession of marijuana. Can't get that job. Can't get a job, then what happens to me? Bad things happen, all right? So we need fundamental reform of a criminal justice system. What unemployment rate for young people is off the wall, 15, 20, 25%. So if you're or higher. So if you're a high school dropout, what do you think you're going to be doing to get income? You're not going to be doing some good things, perhaps. So first thing we have to do is invest in jobs for those kids and education for those kids rather than jails and incarceration. Give you an example. Right now in Los Angeles, like even in California, there's a proposal to spend billions of dollars on more jails. And many people at the grassroots level, and I'm supporting that effort, are opposed to that. Put that money into kids, into jobs and education, not billions of dollars into more jails. Okay. Second of all, we have to rethink the so-called war on drugs. And the good thing is happening all over this country, including my own state of Vermont. Marijuana, for example, is now either becoming legal in some states or it is being decriminalized, all right? Third thing we have to do, many people don't know this. I must tell you, I didn't know this till a year ago or so. I don't know how many of you know that. Right now, to answer Angela's question, there are hundreds of thousands of people in jail in America at this moment. You know what their crime is? Their crime is that they're poor. They cannot afford bail. Now, I remember reading Charles Dickens and Debtor's Prison. You remember that? People were put into jail because they owed money and they couldn't pay it back. That is going on in America today, in a sense. You got debtor's prison when people cannot afford bail. So we've got to end that. So I think we have to look at a number of areas, but the fundamental issue is to ask ourselves, how does it happen in the richest country in the history of the world that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? We're spending $80 billion locking up fellow Americans. So there's a whole long list of things we have to do. We've got to get rid of mandatory minimum sentences so judges have more discretion. But bottom line is, let's invest in our kids, let's invest in education rather than jails and incarceration.
I do want to hear from a young person on this as well. All of those things, and as we start to move toward. How do we
Well, over the last 2 summers, I've had as I worked there, I would do stuff like see a lot of young kids there, especially my age, and it would just hurt my heart because they are finished with this program, even if they didn't get approved for PTI, when they're finished going, it's hard for them to try to get a job or try to go get benefits because they're looked at as a criminal. They're marked with that on their face. They can't take it away because that's how it's hard for them to try to move forward because they're always placed with that one thing that they did as a mistake on their back, and it becomes so hard for them to move on with their lives. I feel like the community says that they want to help them, but you're always given that judgmental look because of the mistake that I made in my life. And I feel like the PTI program is very helpful to some kids. If you're not into the PTI program, it doesn't get expunged, it doesn't go away. And I like as I read over the REDEEM Act, I liked a lot about what that would help them so much just by taking that one mistake that they made and they learned their lesson, allowing them to move forward with their lives. That would just help them so much. PTI is a pretrial intervention.
Jamie, I want you to talk about this, but I want you to back to education with the student pipeline. How our youth from going into
I grew up in I can tell you, opportunity was that's the only place that they we have to tackle all of this energy and resources into are bastions of hopelessness. It's sad. It is so sad. I've gone just recently went back to saw the young kids. It's basically based on the statistics say that 10 young black guys out there, and that's sad when we're kids who grow up, when we have babies. I have a young boy who all I have is nothing. They will end up doing. Nobody has a kid and says, well, you know, I'm going to go to prison. That's not what we want. Nobody wants that for their kids. We got to figure out how do we improve our education system, how we improve opportunities for these young people to get opportunities opportunities to leave their communities. I taught ninth grade social studies in Orangeburg. I had 2 kids who could not find South Carolina on the map. They lived in South Carolina their entire lives, never left Orangeburg, couldn't find it on the map. And other kids out here who get to go to Paris, France, and their parents work at this industry and do this, and they're exposed to so much more. We have to figure out how we create those opportunities to expose our young kids so that they can see there is a world outside of selling drugs. There's a world outside of getting addicted to drugs, which is a healthcare crisis rather than a criminal one. And those are the things that we really, really need to focus on.
Thank you. Okay, so as we are nearing the end, we have one more topic, the environment. And I'm actually going to open this one up. With as many natural disasters as we've been having, besides hurricane damage, 1,000-year event, there has been some discussion about for areas. Have you, in your lasting effects, haven't been able to have? Recently held a town hall with her position on Clyburn and that speaks a lot towards investing. That is also, as you talk about that and how those
30 seconds.
And I'm actually going to give you a little bit more time. But Jamie, start getting your thoughts together as well, because I'm coming to you next about things, especially the 10, 20, 30 plan.
Thank you, Angela, for that. Dominique said, simple and true. Tragically, we have a president who believes very, very wrong. All of you, I think, are aware of major reports coming out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Government, which tells us not just that climate change is real, but if we do not act very boldly and aggressively, and quickly, the IPCC gave us 12 years, not a long time, to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, or else there will be irreparable damage done to this planet, to our country, and that the planet, think about this, in a church, God's earth will be irreparably damaged, and the planet will be leaving to our children and our grandchildren will be increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. Now, what do we have to do? The first thing, and it's a point that I make all the time, we have to understand who causes this problem, and it's not just Trump. We have a fossil fuel industry that has lied and lied and lied and refused to acknowledge, quite like the tobacco industry. Remember the tobacco industry? Well, you know, years ago. I do, so I'm older than you. They came before Congress, oh, tobacco smoking, not a problem. They lied. And the fossil fuel industry is lying today. So what do we have to do? We have to take on the power of the fossil fuel industry, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And here is the good news. When we do that, Angela, we not only help lead the world, this is an international problem, we lead the world in a new energy direction. We create millions of good-paying jobs in this country. You have buildings, I'm sure in South Carolina, certainly in Vermont, that need weatherization. We need to make them more energy efficient. We need a transportation system, a rail system, automobiles, which are much more energy efficient. We need to move aggressively to solar and wind and other sustainable technologies. And when you do that, you create millions of good-paying jobs. Now, you asked me also about legislation, Congressman Clyburn and others, about investing in communities that are hurting. And that is obviously important. You talked about the infrastructure. So it's not only green jobs and transforming our energy system, it's rebuilding our plain old infrastructure. This is America. We should not have roads and bridges and water systems. Flint, Michigan is not the only city in America where kids are drinking bad water, all right? Rebuilding our airports and again creating millions of decent paying jobs. Infrastructure is affordable housing. Let's build housing and create jobs. So there is a huge opportunity, it seems to me, to rebuild America, to lead the world in combating climate change, rebuilding our infrastructure. And when we do that, we make this country safer and stronger, and we create millions of jobs. Instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, those are the kinds of investments we should be making.
Jamie, very quickly, because we have time constraints. The 10-20-30 plan as introduced by Clyburn, talk about the advantage of that over the opportunity. Still working out details. IRS is not actually open
opportunity zones.
Are you guys tired yet? No. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our assigned time, but I do want to give the an opportunity for some final thoughts in this particular Pastor Great.
I first want to say thank you so much for having me here. I've had a really great time learning. I just want to end with saying one of my Mahatma Gandhi is be to see in the world. If there's something that you feel that isn't right or isn't okay, then you should be start the movement to change.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I just want to say simply, when elephants fight, the grass suffers. When elephants fight, grass gets uprooted. We agree on so much. Small things, big barriers. Together, no problem. America is a good. Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. So much for everyone in.
This has been for all of you. privilege and the right can be taken away. So I want, because to be relevant, also being drum major.
Senator Sanders, as you take the mic, final remarks, I know there are this growing list of presidential hopefuls.
Now, Angela, why did I think you might ask that question? All right.
I'm here to moderate as the people want to know.
Let me just, I'm going to. We have good things that happen. Just the Democrats. Millions of young getting involved, like these guys, getting involved in the political process in a way that we have not seen before. And they are the future of this country. And we have seen in the House not only 40 new Democrats coming in, but many of them are people of color. They are young. They are women. All right? That's a big change. And the other thing that has happened, which I think is enormous, many of the ideas that some of us a few years ago were talking about, where everybody said we were crazy. Imagine that health care for every man, woman, and child as a right, Medicare for all. Oh, Bernie, that's a crazy idea. Well, last poll I saw 70% of the American people support it. Raising the minimum wage, I guess here in South Carolina, you're $7.50, $7.25 an hour? $7.25? That is a starvation wage. All right? And when we talked a few years ago about raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour, Bernie, you're too extreme. Well, guess what's happening? New Jersey just passed that, or will pass it the other day. California, New York State. Public colleges and universities, tuition-free, making real progress. Criminal justice reform, we talked about it. There are now prosecutors and district attorneys being elected on a platform of not putting more people in jail, but reducing the jail population. So I say all of those things because Trump can get us depressed, but all over this country there are a lot of really good things that are happening. But here is where I am to answer Angela. Honest answer that I can. There are some really good people who have announced. They're friends of mine. I've known Elizabeth Warren for 20 years. Cory Booker was, I don't know if Cory will run, I suspect he will. Gillibrand, a friend of mine. I know all these people, they're good people. My views are maybe a little bit different. And I have got to, and I'll tell you what it is, and this is gonna, I'm asking you an honest question. I believe that real change, and this is what Dr. King said, real change never takes place from the top on down. It takes place from the bottom on up. And that's what the civil rights movement was about. It's what the union movement was about. It's what the women's movement was about. And I believe that at the end of the day, and by the way, at the end of Dr. King's life, he kind of believed this as well, that you have to take on the people who have power. Now, we don't talk about this. You're not going to see this on television tonight. You're not going to read about it in the papers, who are also owned by a relatively small number of people. We have a nation in which the three wealthiest people, Jamie, own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. You've got one family, the Walton family owns Walmart, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American. You got 6 large financial institutions on Wall Street that have a GDP, that have assets equivalent to 54% of our GDP. Okay? You have a fossil fuel industry. You got a pharmaceutical industry that rips us off every day. You got very powerful people in the insurance company who will do everything, spend hundreds of millions of dollars to prevent us from getting Medicare for all. So to me, the assessment that I have got to make is there a willingness in this country at the grassroots level to take those people on? And this is a tough fight. I mean, the media, corporate media, is not going to be sympathetic, trust me. The insurance companies, the drug companies, these people are not going to be sympathetic. This is what King was trying to do at the end of his life. Do you remember what he was doing? You remember what the Poor People's March was about? The Poor People's March was saying to low-income African Americans, whites, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans, we have got to come together to fundamentally change national priorities. Right? That ain't easy. And believe me, Dr. King had difficulties in his time during that period. This is not easy stuff. Is there a willingness to do this? Okay. All right. I mean, this is big stuff. This is tough stuff. This is tough stuff. Frederick Douglass reminded us, real change never happens without struggle. People are not going to give you your freedom. You're going to have to stand up and fight for that. So I'm going to be going around the country and I'm going to be talking to people and see whether there is that willingness. Because if we go forward, it'll be a very hard campaign. We're going to take on every powerful special interest in this country. So that's the question, and I'm to be honest with you, that's what I'm looking at. You know, we're looking at it, and we're going to assess it. But Angela, I thank you very much for asking that. And I want to thank, you know, we've been here in South Carolina last night and today, and I want to thank all of you in the NAACP, President Murphy, for your kindness and your hospitality. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all so much. That concludes our roundtable discussion, but we do have some remarks coming from the president, Brenda Murphy. Thank you so much to Steve Love for having me and asking me to do this. I feel so honored and special to be able to help South Carolina NAACP with this panel. Thank you to all of our panelists. Can we give them one more hand, please? Kennedy, Pastor Gray, Senators Sanders, and Jamie Harrison. Now we'll turn it over to the South Carolina President, Brenda Murphy.
I just again would like to thank the panelists for their participation. Our moderator, you did an excellent job. Thank you so much. Senator Sanders, thank you for taking the time to come here to South Carolina and spend the day with us. Martin Luther King's Day at the Dome. Is important to us. And Senator Booker were both. But even greater, I want to thank you that are out there in the audience that took time today to come in and be with us and to ask, well, you didn't ask any questions, did you? Well, to listen to the questions that were asked and the responses that were given by the panel members, and especially Senator Sanders. It's been a long day. I'm not going to ask you to stay any longer. I don't have much to say because I'm tired and I was very cold this morning. So I just hope that you all have a good evening and be blessed. Thank you.